Please come to order. Good afternoon. Welcome to our annual brief from the Maryland Association of Counties. I am Randy Guy, President Commissioner of St. Mary's County. Let me introduce the other commissioners. Sitting to my right, representing 1st Commissioner District, which includes Ridge, Piney Point, St. George Island, Mr. Eric Colvin.
Good afternoon.
Representing 2nd Commissioner District, which includes Leonardtown, Hollywood, Mr. Mike Hewitt.
Good afternoon.
Sitting to my left, John O'Connor represents the 3rd Commissioner District, which includes Charlotte Hall, 7th District, Golden Beach, and Mechanicsville, is unable to join us today. Representing the 4th Commissioner District, which includes Lexington Park, some of California, Great Mills, and some of Hollywood, Mr. Todd Morgan. David Weiskopf, who is our county attorney and acting county administrator, is sitting at the table to my left.
Good afternoon.
Elisa Cassis, our communications director, is sitting at the table to my right.
Good afternoon.
Amy Carter, our video media producer, is behind the glass. Please turn your cell phones off or on vibrate. Joining us today is Michael Sanderson, the executive director of the Maryland Association of Counties, and Wilbur Levengood, Caroline County Commissioner and President of MACO. You say Kevin's not going to be here.
Okay.
I'm turning it over to you, Mr. Levengood.
Thank you, President Guy.
Levengood, I'm sorry.
I'm Wilbur Levengood from Caroline County, Maryland. Commissioner, nice to meet everybody. I know Randy and Todd from legislative sessions over the last 11 years. It's been a while, but we're working together and trying to do what's right for the citizens of the state of Maryland, and Michael's going to bring us up to date on some new stuff. So, Mike.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Levengood, and thank you all for your time and carving out some time to hear from us today. At its best, this exchange is really good as a two-way exchange. I think we always want to bring you information and news from Annapolis and from the legislative process and things that'll affect the counties, but also are very much interested in hearing what's on your mind or what issues are here locally that you might share with other jurisdictions or that we should be on the lookout for as we continue visits around the state. We've distributed a packet of information to you all, and I don't intend to go through that in a lot of depth. My thinking, to be respectful of your time today, is I want to touch on a handful of issues fairly briefly, and then if there are other things that you all would like to get into in more detail or things that I've just missed, your feedback to Commissioner Levengood and to me is probably the best use of our collective time. So with that, I'll start with a quick reflection back on the legislative session. We're into July, but it still feels relatively fresh. They wrapped up in the month of April. No surprise, it was an awfully peculiar session. The health protocols made the conduct of public business more challenging and difficult. You all have found this trying to do your public meetings and make sure you get input from stakeholders and from your residents and so forth. In the ways that counties have had to do this, managing what is, relatively speaking, small meetings like these, the General Assembly had to do so on a much larger scale with scores and scores of their own members and with a clause in the Constitution, the Maryland State Constitution, that required business by each chamber be done by a quorum on the floor of their chamber. So the Maryland Senate can't do business through a Zoom meeting or through remote channels. They literally had to physically be on the floor of the Senate to take votes and act as a deliberative body. That's tricky in times where that's a small old building and so forth. It required a lot of plexiglass and a lot of break taking and so forth, but they managed to get through and conduct a reasonably normal legislative session. Most committee hearings and activity was virtual, but the legislators were around Annapolis for in-person voting sessions and so forth. We'll see what pieces of that last into the future, but they cobbled together an effective and pretty reasonable way to conduct their public business for 21. I think there are some stakeholders who probably felt they weren't able to get their say on matters. It's just hard when you can't meet with individual legislators face to face and have the 10-minute follow-up to the 2-minute testimony. I would say on balance, county governments and MACO were better off than many stakeholders just because we have so many good and strong relationships in Annapolis. We know senators and delegates, we know their staff, and in a lot of cases, a question like, well, are the counties going to be able to do this? If we pass this bill, will the counties be able to do the thing it says? And that's a more fundamental question than is some random trade association okay with these amendments and that sort of thing. So we were at the table, not in a perfect way, but in a better way than some other stakeholders, I suspect. It was not easy, but I think we represented you all reasonably well and came out with a number of good results. I'll speak to a couple of things. First, just my admiration for you all in working through what we hope is a recovery from the depths of the pandemic. We're all watching the news and data from on the ground with our public health metrics and so forth. Commissioner Levengood and I listened to a presentation earlier this morning in Charles County. Their health department and all the allied agencies within county government gave a pretty big rundown at the state and county level. And everybody's watching the Delta variant and so forth, but getting back to in-person public meetings and public business is hopefully the track that we all can stay on. And I know Commissioner and I very much appreciate your time and having us here today. Technically speaking, the state has ended its state of emergency for COVID effective July 1st. That was done with sort of a 45-day grace period. So there are still some things like your driver's license. If you've got an extension on that, that won't be due until August 15th. Basically, August 15th is really the date you circle for when all those provisions kick off. So counties have had enough time that if you still want to extend provisions you made temporary at one point, you'll contemplate that sort of thing. We've seen jurisdictions, considering liquor laws and outdoor dining and a variety of other, extended measures that seemed temporary but might now feel like they could be extended. So that's a deliberation happening at the local level too. I'll mention as a big, broad topic where we, I think, exceeded our expectations is with the rollout of broadband. I know you all, as leaders locally, have been very ambitious in trying to connect and reach residents across your county. There's no jurisdiction that has a zero challenge with broadband. We've got underserved and completely unserved pockets in every jurisdiction, including Baltimore City and the major urban areas. There are places that just don't have connectivity, and we've all heard and seen these stories of kids parked outside fast food restaurants to try and get Wi-Fi to finish homework during virtual schooling. That brought this issue to a higher level with just about every policymaker. And we're going to make up a lot of ground in Maryland over the next couple of years. There's a lot of projects that probably were not realistic just because of the financial side, that with an infusion of the state commitment of its own receipt of federal funds and flexibility on the local end for county funds and municipal dollars to target this and leverage those resources to make some ground up. I think we're going to advance the ball more rapidly than we ever would have guessed, I think, over the next year or two. And
Mr. Sanderson, it's a timely comment because this morning we just allocated 10% of our American Rescue funds to broadband with plans to do more.
Spot on. So that, this is what we're hearing as we've met. We're around halfway through the list of Maryland jurisdictions and having meetings like this and both formal and informal conversations. It's a high priority, and it's responding, I think, correctly to your residents' needs. And the equity issues really speak for themselves after what we've seen with telework and with telelearning and also the advent of remote medicine and so forth. The need is stronger than ever. So hats off to you for taking a good step.
Thank you.
I'll mention one other thing. Because of the peculiar circumstance where we are right after a U.S. Census, the redrawing of districts is a once every 10-year process that needs to happen at every level of government to reflect the new information about where people live and make sure our districts are balanced and fair in a manner that the courts have set as constitutional. This is a job for everybody. This year's data is going to come to us later than we're used to. It sounds like the fully scrubbed information that can be used by your county level redistricting efforts, but also by the state for its own district drawing is not going to appear until late September. So you can do the counting in your mind of the candidates need to file by late February, and they need to know in what district they reside and can run and so forth. This is going to make things difficult. My prediction for you, and this is an informed but not infallible prediction, is most likely the General Assembly will convene a short special session in early December to draw congressional districts. By the Constitution, the process for adopting the state legislative districts has to be done during the General Assembly regular session. So that'll be introduced in January. I would anticipate acted on very early in session, like the first 10 days of session, districts drawn, passed, and passed out of the General Assembly. The next step may well be a challenge in the Maryland courts, and I can't forecast, whether that challenge will gain traction and so forth, whether it will protract on and so forth. But that's probably the timetable, is that congressional districts in early December and state legislative districts in early-ish January.
Mr. Sanderson, if I can just interrupt,
Sure,
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I know you're on a roll, and I hate to break you up. But back to this redistricting thing. If you're talking late September for the data, we were hoping for early September. We've already appointed a redistricting committee. They had 6 meetings in September scheduled. Now, what would be helpful if MACO could provide us is what can these people do prior to the data? Could you give us some kind of a library or something where they could go and acclimate themselves to what their job is?
So I haven't filled in every detail, so there is good news. There's going to be a set of preliminary numbers available sooner than the 1st of September. So your commission is going to have numbers to deal with.
Okay, so they will have data to
Yes.
deal with, and they won't be sitting around thinking,
Right.
what we're
Yeah,
going to do.
it won't be an exercise in thumb twiddling. What's going to probably have to happen is that the final revision of data will require some fine changes around the edges.
Right.
So most jurisdictions have a decent idea where the growth in your jurisdiction has been over the last number of years. So you start with a pretty good guess. The first round of data that comes from the census will refine that guess and get you pretty close to the final mark. And then September 30th, you get a final set of sheets of paper, and it might turn into, okay, this district needs 1 more precinct. We'll move it from 2 into 3 or that sort of
Right,
thing.
sounds easy. But
Yeah.
my point is that this still has to be done by December 31st. That's a question.
So your local process, it may be a function of your local law may say December 31st. That may be the timetable you're working with, or maybe that's the charge for your commission.
I don't know.
That is, I'm sorry, that is the public local law. I think 26-2 states that it has to be done by December 31st.
Okay, and my point being is you got holidays in there, Christmas and Thanksgiving, and plus you got this restricted, compressed time. We just need to be able to. I reached out to a lady to do it. She wanted to do it. When she got the meeting schedule, she says, "Look, I can't.
Right.
I can't do this. It's too much." So we have to be wary of what we're asking people to do, and the pay is lousy. So we got to be careful of what we ask people to do and what they can.
Right. You're exactly correct. It's a big lift and it's a short timetable. It's a function of multiple factors, but among them, the delay in collecting the data because of a pandemic circumstance is part of what we're dealing with. So,
Whether it comes from MACO or somebody else, if you can help us by referring these people to let them start doing some research in advance, so they can kind of be ready to hit the ground running.
Right.
That'd be helpful.
Right. We will corral resources with the State Department of Planning, who has the most data, far more than MACO does. But anything that we can do to be helpful for your local commission and the volunteers who are going to make that effort, we will do absolutely all we can. I guarantee you that.
Thank you.
So that is a substantial and important undertaking that's coming up in this combination election and redistricting year for the General Assembly. Every 20 years, we get to double duty that. Without belaboring topics too deeply, this was a busy legislative session for police reforms, for a variety of things that affected. There was a sort of mostly technical fix-up bill with education funding and the 10-year Kerwin plan. A number of things got passed through the General Assembly. If you'd like to talk about them in more detail, Commissioner Levengood and I are happy to do that, but I'll park there for the moment and just make a plug for we're really happy to be back in the business of having an in-person summer conference. August 18th to 21st are the dates for our Ocean City event. We're very committed to making this a safe and productive event that our county officials and other attendees will feel comfortable being part of. But getting back to the in-person exchange has an awful lot of value that you can't quite get from webinars and the remote conversations that we've been able to have over the last year and a half or so. Those will have their place, and they probably will to some degree forever. But the random table of people over lunch, and suddenly you realize you have an issue in common, and you swap business cards, and you end up with a solution that more than covers all the time and effort that it took to get down there and spend that time. Those are the sort of things we want to build back towards. So conference program looks terrific. The turnout is going to be strong, and the setting is going to be very safe and responsible for our attendees. So we're looking forward to that as well. So I will stop there, and if you all have questions about policy or other issues that MACO can be helpful with, we are happy to take them.
I just want to say thank you, guys. As you pointed out, Michael, it was a very difficult year. Councilwoman Price did a great job coming over and doing our Zoom meetings on a pretty frequent basis, with Randy and I trying to adapt to technology and trying to make it work. But all in all, I think you guys did a very good job this year with the legislative agenda, getting the committees to work together, trying to achieve group goals, recognizing sometimes the irony for the people that don't understand is that at MACO, every county gets one vote and majority rules. So oftentimes when you watch the legislature's stacked in the middle and the rurals don't get a lot of say, but at least at MACO, the rurals do get a say, and it works out pretty well to get a fair and balanced approach, I think, to the way you approach business. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Can I ask you some financial things you may or may not be able to answer? And if you can't answer them, that's totally fine.
Commissioner, I always assume that this will be our opportunity for that exact conversation, so I'm looking forward to it.
Now, we passed our budget back in May.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we don't have the luxury of when we pass our budget is our revenue projections coming in that come in May and come in June. Now, of course, we'll get, again, some in August and bigger ones than later in the year.
Yep.
Now, as a small business owner who, thank God, is retired, I didn't have to go through what all these small businesses went through with COVID and having to shut down, and whether you're a restaurant or a hotel or just some small business, and then obviously trying to get your employees back now that it's coming out. My point is, I expect there to be some kind of impact on revenues because we were down for so long. Now, Mr. Sanderson, you and I have had this conversation where the federal money coming in, the stimulus money, has actually masked, that's your term,
For sure.
the real economy, and I agree with that. And that will go away. But when do we expect this other shoe to drop? Is it going to be 24, 25, when, okay, the feds are gone now, they're so totally in debt they can't borrow anymore, and now we got to figure out who pays for this stuff, and we have to raise our taxes? That's the part that worries me, is that we get all this free money that ends up with some strings attached.
So all of these are very fair and very timely questions, and I'm not sure that I will be able to give you an answer that satisfies your curiosity. I'll take my best swing at it in a couple of ways. Number one, there's never been more economic opaqueness. There's never been so much uncertainty about the status of the actual American economy than right now. I'm confident that that's a true statement. The aggressive action by the federal government to try and keep businesses from going under, to keep residents from going hungry, and to keep the governments from having to lay off staff at the time when they needed to be on the front lines. All of those things combined together to, whether you think this is good policy or not, is sort of set it aside for the moment. It's absolutely created a fictional economy that I very much believe that these federal actions have masked. I personally believe there's a recession underneath all this, and that we just don't see it at the moment in any of the conventional ways. Every economist and every revenue forecaster is used to looking at indicators like unemployment. It's easy. What's going on with unemployment? That's the first simplest indicator of the state of the economy. What is the unemployment rate today? Even the more complicated U6 and rates like that, what do they tell us today? We don't genuinely know. In a few weeks, Maryland and most of the country will step down on the amount of unemployment benefits for those who are filing and receiving unemployment. Will that change the labor market? Will that bring some people back into actively seeking work? That's part of the theory that may happen. We don't know. I think the first clue that we in Maryland and that counties the first real clue we should see will be the November distributions of our income tax. November is the next big, meaningful distribution. It includes a reconciliation, but that's a big one. And that'll probably be our first clue, in my judgment, as to what the status of like the county economy actually looks like. We're not going to be, we're to some degree, we're going to have some illusory income because folks who are getting unemployment benefits are no longer taxed on that at the state or county level. So that's another moving part here. So I think a little latitude for the folks who are in the business of making guesses about the revenue side of the county budget is in order, because it's never been a harder thing to do than right at the moment. We'll start getting pieces of the puzzle by the end of this calendar year, but we could easily be back at this table a year from now saying largely the same thing. I don't mean to be depressing in saying so, but it may take a good long time to unravel. And I don't know what the temperament will be to just let businesses who have been pontooned by federal grants and contributions from their state and local governments and so forth, but just don't have a viable going concern any longer. At what point do they just end?
Well, see, what concerns me is we have this push to hire more people. And look, we can probably do a better job if we have more people. I'm not opposed to that idea. But what I'm opposed to is once you hire somebody, you're expected to keep them. Or if I get a job somewhere, I'm expected to stay on that payroll as long as I do it. But, the last thing we want to do is come along and say, oh, by the way, the revenues we projected aren't there. As much as the other half of saying, we don't know if the revenues are there, and then they go through the roof. That's the part that's so hard for this commissioner to kind of get my head around. Commissioner Levengood. I was going to say Willengood, but Levengood. What about your county? What are you guys doing?
We're probably low populated, higher rural as agricultural. We experience very low unemployment,
Oh, good.
and our numbers have been pretty solid all the way through. Only problem is our numbers are small. And what they're forcing to us to pay, I needed to build an elementary school, forced my income tax to the maximum to take advantage of the disparity grant. For me, there's nowhere to go get any more money.
All you can do is raise property tax.
Not
He's
going to do
maxed
that.
out.
You're maxed out on property tax?
No, but I'm not going to.
No.
That'll
No,
be
no, maybe
somebody
you're not
else's
personally.
responsibility.
But you max out on income at 320. But
Yes, sir.
the key is income, property, that can go
Yeah,
Wherever you
go
get
wherever
the,
you want to take it. but,
well, wherever you get the
Till
wherewithal.
they
to-
tar and feather you and throw you in a barrel.
Again, that's not popular. But again, you get put in situations where people expect services, and provide those services cost money, and then you get used to this, I use the term false economy or whatever it is, and you say, wait a minute now, I had all this money and now it's gone away. I guess my fear is what the government, the federal government has done. They have replaced the economic activity of this country that was going on before COVID with stimulus money. And now, is that economic activity, are those businesses going to come back and resume where they were, or actually be upbeat? You know, so that's the part that's just hard for this commissioner. Look, I came from small business. It was tough. If we didn't have a check every 2 weeks from the government, we weren't, you know, if we didn't make it, if we didn't sell the service, we didn't eat. And that's what I worry about, is we get to a point where these people just can't make it. Many small businesses have told me, I wouldn't have made it without this stimulus money.
I know several too, and I know some that still did.
Again, so I guess it's uncertain. I'm sorry to
We've
give you
lost
this
some
tough one to.
We lost some businesses, but agriculturally, we had a fairly good year.
Well, that's,
However, things aren't shaping up real good right now as far as water's concerned, and there's a fair amount of land there that's not irrigated, so.
again, we
Have a
have
bad
this base
agricultural.
out here that, you know, average salary is $115,000, you know, plus all the contractors and everything they support. It's probably a
say
different scenario for you. in
Our
this.
average salary, if we're lucky, will be 42.5.
Okay.
So my last assurance is you're by no means, Commissioner, are you on an island in grappling with these. Wherever the margin is, there's always, I think there's always a tension between making a long-term commitment to a service level based on what things look like today and in the short term versus the security in doing so in the long term. But without making the long-term commitment, like going out and hiring good staff to deliver the service that you want to do today is exceedingly hard if you do it on a 1 or 2 year grant because it's backed by only federal dollars. That itself is a catch-22. It's not much of this job is easy. So hats off to you.
Michael, I agree with you on that, the premise that you and Commissioner Hewitt are coming from, but if we're looking down the road to the next legislative session and realize, as I used the analogy before, the big five guys in the middle get all the votes and the guys on the outside, so we have to sit on the outside and watch. What would you foresee with this economic, whatever it's going to be, economic purge, that the agenda would be going into the next legislative session, knowing that they're going into an election year?
It's a fair question, and I'm probably going to disappoint you by not having anything that seems like a spike at the end of the volleyball game here. I think as a practical matter, it's an election year, and that tends to leave the legislature less likely to take up issues of a whole lot of difficulty and hurt feelings and controversy and so forth. So a lot of these 60-40 issues tend to get shelved in an election year, and they can wait another year until the next term. So there'll probably be some of that. I don't think that it's likely that the immediate year's fiscal agenda is going to need a whole lot of assistance. I don't think the bottom's going to fall out of the state economy so quickly that the governor will have a terrible time presenting a budget this coming January, or that the legislature will have a terrible time building a fiscal plan that they're happy with and can be done with it by April. I don't think it shapes up to be the kind of year where there's a transformative, we're going to have a big debate about a huge fiscal issue. They just did that with the education commitment. Really,
That was my next question.
So this term is really going to be defined. I mean, the issues with the pandemic sort of on their own track. Set that aside for the moment. politically speaking, the state making this huge 10-year commitment to school outcomes and funding and committing the dollars from both the state and from the counties to try and get there over the next decade, that's really what this last four-year term is ultimately going to be about from the General Assembly. Making this happen, being the first state to go this far, that's going to be the signature achievement. I don't think it's going to be something they do at the 11th hour.
Do you think that would be a contentious issue in the next session, recognizing not knowing where the monies are coming from? I mean, we already got a 2-year kick the can down the road. So now you don't know when you kick the can down the road and sort of push the ball from there.
Right. So I'm at risk of turning this into a 45-minute conversation. That's probably not what your audience is looking for and probably not what you're looking for. So I'll try and compress this reasonably. But the state is not going to feel pressure on Kerwin spending as rapidly as some of the counties will. The reason why is, you may remember a couple of years ago, the voters passed a constitutional amendment that was sort of the third time committing funds from casinos to a special education trust fund, but this wording said it's above and beyond the commitments that had existed in law prior to the establishment of the new gambling revenues. So basically, this time we really mean it. It's going to be all for new money. That money is sitting in an education trust fund, and because the Kerwin plan got delayed a year because of the veto and so forth, it's been building up a fund balance. So the state can draw down from an account for its first year. It's going to come up with, we need $300 million next year? Fine, we have it. And then the following year, we need another $350? We have it. It's not going to be until around fiscal 25 or 6 when the state actually is going to have to deal with it on more or less a cash basis, where it actually competes with dollars in that year's budget and makes that year's budget challenging. So for them, they commit $350 and then another $350 and so forth. They can fund this with what they've got sitting in a pillow. That's different from the county circumstance where, as you know, there's an expectation that you'll keep doing what you've been doing, and then you may be asked to do more based on how the formula carves out your local share. And you've all seen your forecasts on what it might mean for FY23 and for 24 and for 25 and so forth compared to what you've been funding and so forth. So it probably lands in the average county sooner than it actually lands in Annapolis as a contentious issue. So this may have a long fuse on it, so to speak.
Thank you.
Anything else, anybody? You must have briefed us completely, Mike. So it looks good. Appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you in Ocean City, both of you, and continue our legislative when we start back up into Annapolis. Look forward to going back up there in person and working with you. And I appreciate. I've seen what MACO does for people out there. I might call them our lobbyists from the county, because they help us with issues that deal with usually all the counties, but they also have helped us out with our own legislation when we need it. And that's very helpful when you go up there to Annapolis and deal with legislators up there, to have somebody to be your advocate up there. And you definitely have been, no doubt. You've helped us out a lot. And Mr. Levengood, I'm going to miss your term after this year. Appreciate your help and work and being the president of MACO this year. So with that said, I thank you all very much again for being here. Any more questions, anybody? Good. Session is adjourned.
Thank you.